To understand the repatriation of Mexicans in the 1930s, we must first look at where it all started, and what caused our president at the time to push such an insensitive act into existence. It all started with the great crash of Wall Street. This happened on October 24, 1929. This event was the biggest contributor to sending our economy into a recession the likes of which we had never seen before. The stock market was flooded with orders to sell and ultimately crashed, sending the American public into a frenzy. People flooded to banks in droves to withdraw all of their money. This in turn caused the banks to fail. Once the economy tanked and the banks failed, industry as a whole failed. Factories and other businesses were forced to slow down production and construction and began to fire their employees. For those who stayed, employee wages dipped so low that they were causing people to amass debt. All of this chaos is what led to the real reason that the repatriation even happened: unemployment. Unemployment skyrocketed in the Great Depression. By 1933, it hit its peak, and it stayed relatively high until the 1940s. So while people were out in the streets pleading and begging for work, looking at the government for help, what does the government do? Well, when referring to government during this era, we must properly refer to the president. The president at this time was none other than Herbert Hoover. President Hoover heard the people's pleas loud and clear and had no option but to look for a scapegoat. Who that scapegoat would be? Well, you guessed it, the Mexicans. Who better to blame on it than the race of people who comprised the majority of the workforce that was still employed? President Hoover took the chance to deflect the blame for poor regulation of the stock market and the economy and went ahead and just put it on the Mexicans. This was particularly easy since racism against Mexicans at this time was already alive and well. He just needed an excuse, and they happened to be the perfect fit for this. He accordingly began the push to deport Mexicans. Instead of calling it deportation, they said it was repatriation, or sending someone back to their homeland or motherland. The repatriation had several issues. One was that early on the process, they offered people to leave, quote-unquote, voluntarily. The issue with this was that they weren't really giving them an option. It was basically go on your own, or we're going to take everything and send you away. The second and most glaring issue was the amount of people who were sent back and the percentage of them that were American citizens. As far as the amount of people who were sent to Mexico, it varies from source to source. But one thing is generally accepted, that out of the hundreds of thousands or even millions of people being sent back, 60% were American citizens. They were violating these people's rights, and unfortunately, no one batted an eye. The side effects of this mass deportation were something that would actually come to bite the United States in the butt. The number of immigrants entering the U.S. from Mexico dipped dramatically in 1930. No immigrants means no cheap labor force, and often the people of Mexican descent were the ones in the difficult agricultural and manual labor jobs. This low number bled into the 1940s, which was when we all know that World War II took place. During this time, the mass enlistments and deployments of men left farms, factories, industries, and businesses without a labor force. This is when that kick in the butt I was referring to comes into play. Because the U.S. needed a labor force, they had to swallow their pride and ask Mexico for its people for the purpose of putting together a labor force. Thus, the Bracero program was born. This program brought Mexicans back into the U.S. for the purpose of filling manual labor jobs. It was ironic that after kicking them out, they would end up having to bring them back to fill the very jobs they need and left. The program is what brings the repatriation full circle and closes it.